I often say that when it comes to things you can't see, like God, things you can't know, like the future, uncertainty is a great way to go. It's a great place to start.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
for inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up. Then later on in the pod, we sat down with singer-songwriter Derek Webb, who's got a new album coming out next week titled Survival Songs. Before we begin, though, we do want to let our audience know that in our interview this week with Derek, we talk about some sensitive issues pertaining to the LGBTQ plus community. If you feel like you need to talk with someone after this episode, we want to encourage you to get a hold of our good friends over at the Trevor Project. It's going to be a good pod, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm so disappointed.
Way to kick off the
I
show.
know. So last week I got to come to you in our intro with this great story
Terrific
about
story.
your Elmer Fudd camera getting literally shit on by our skunk Muskie.
Yep.
And this week I have no updates about your camera getting shit on, but our investment portfolio has been literally shit on. So that's not very fun.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster week for the stock market.
So, dear listeners, unfortunately, you will be stuck with us for many more years than planned because we will not be retiring. You're welcome.
That's exactly right. No, lots going on in the stock market this week. Terrible losses, but then midweek, incredible gains. All of this has to do with the tariffs that President Trump has levied against foreign countries. And, when we saw the change in the stock market this week, I was perusing the news and found this quote by former Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, who said, things got so bad that even Trump had to change his mind on this thing.
Trump, who famously doesn't back down, right?
Yeah, famously does
And
not
never
back down.
surrenders,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Right. Yes. Even he had to change his mind. So
Yeah.
this is a terrible segue. But speaking of changing your mind,
Yes.
no, we have a great guest on today
We do.
who sparked a lot of conversation in our house about that very thing, changing your mind.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So today we are going to be talking to Derek Webb, who,
Yes.
for those of you who were contemporary Christian music fans in the 90s and early
If you were in a
aughts,
youth group back in the 1990s, you know.
you know Derek Webb
Exactly.
from Caedmon's Call.
Yeah.
So anyways, we have this delightful conversation with him today, which we'll share more about in a minute. But he has a quote. We usually don't do this, but we wanted to pull this into the intro because it just did spark so much
It did.
conversation after our interview. But we were talking about creatives and kind of the evolution of your ideology
Sure.
and your thinking. And he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but creatives are to look at the world and describe it, but also realizing the world is changing and we are changing. And if you're doing your job right, you're eventually going to disagree with some of your material.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to change your mind essentially.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
we were really talking about that earlier. And of course, anytime we talk to anyone from, that world of the 80s, 90s contemporary Christian
Right.
music, it takes me right back to youth group, right?
Yes.
I go right back there, and all of a sudden I'm in youth camp in summer of probably 1989, making my boyfriend wear matching t-shirts with me all week, and then not understanding when he was mad about 3 days in because he was taking so much hell from his friends. Yeah, regret that.
Yes.
And yes, just all the things that it just puts me right back in that place and in that
Right.
moment. And then looking back and realizing how much that what Derek says is so true.
Yeah.
Like if we are not evolving and disagreeing with our material, then there's no growth
Right.
there. And so I just really appreciated that and thought we could talk about maybe, I don't know, some things that we've evolved in.
Oh, no.
I know. I know.
This could be scary quickly.
Yeah.
Oh. So what are some of the things that you've changed your mind about?
Well, and we've talked about a couple of these before on the pod. In particular, like works when he's talking about as a creative. I have two papers I've talked about on the pod. One in which I wrote advocating.
Legendary.
Yes, which I still have. Maybe someday they'll see the light of day publicly, but a paper I wrote, I don't know, maybe in junior high about advocating for the election of George H. Bush. That was a fun one to go back and reread. And it was so embarrassing. And then the other one was my very well researched paper.
Very well
in
researched.
High school,
Footnotes and everything.
rallying against abortion.
Yes.
So yes, now those are works that I look back on and absolutely cringe.
Oh, I can imagine.
To see. So yes, I thankfully have evolved and now, no longer hold those views
right.
that I had.
Yeah.
Yay, thank you.
Well, similar to you, I grew up in evangelical circles and we attended very conservative Southern Baptist churches. And so I was steeped in all of that. And as I grew older, I became more conservative. And in my formidable years, later high school into college, there was this national figure that was on my radar that I just idolized and worshiped. And you're not going to believe who that was.
I bet I do.
Okay, take a shot.
You can go ahead.
Rush Limbaugh.
Of course.
Yes, I was a Ditto head back in the day, and I read all of his material, watched his television show, listened to his radio show, would quote him often in some of my college papers. And it got so bad one time, actually, that I wrote this paper in a psychology class. And
in college, right?
In college,
in a time where your mind is supposed to be open and broadened, right?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, mine was closing. And so I wrote this paper, and I can't even remember exactly what the paper was about, but it was so fused with Limbaugh and that type of rhetoric that the professor, hand to God, wrote this in red ink on my paper. Whoa there, little Rush Limbaugh, slow down. So yeah, it's hard to believe that I am the person I am today with this, these progressive views and values that I advocate for. But yes, I changed my mind about Rush Limbaugh.
It is crazy. I think about yes, all of the times I would have written and put things down on paper. And yes, I think about my, 11th grade, honors English teacher reading this, who was definitely like a hippie,
right.
and reading this.
Yeah.
And the fact that she didn't come after me and go, "Hey, sweetie, let's have a talk." I mean, kudos to her for not belittling me about it. She just was like, "You'll get there." I
can remember also one time in class, it was a sociology class, and we were talking about family structures. And again, I apologize, I repent, all the things. But I was very hierarchical when it came to male-female roles in the family. And so we were having this discussion, and some of my female classmates, were taking a more egalitarian view and position of what we were talking about. And so I launch into everything I'd been told as an evangelical and added some Limbaugh stuff. I mean, it was cringeworthy. And my professor, to her great credit.
Her.
Yes, exactly.
That makes this even better.
Exactly. She quietly, didn't scold me, but, said that I was entitled to my views. And kind of helped me see the way. And we had a conversation after class. I came in during office hours, and I want to go back to her and just thank her for not being hypercritical of those views, even though they were horrendous at the time. Mm-hmm. She really did engage me and help me, at least at that point in my time, see a sliver of a different viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And there were people like that along my path and my life that helped me put me on a path to where I am today, that helped me make these changes that I desperately needed to make.
Absolutely. And in talking to Derek and I admit to him in the opening of the interview that I was not I mean, I knew of Caedmon's Call, but at that point, when they came kind of into, onto the main stage and became really popular, you and I were early married. And that's one of the things that I think about that seems so stupid, but was so pivotal in my kind of trajectory is, in my teenage and high, college years, just kind of somewhere along the way thinking that you could only listen to Christian music. And if you didn't, you had to question your salvation. I don't know where this came from. It did not come from my parents at all. They didn't, they listened to rock and roll. But somewhere along the way, through youth group or whatever, that just became the mindset.
Yeah.
And so I struggled with that because I didn't just like Christian music. I liked pop music too. And so by the time I hit college and then met you, and you came along and were like, yeah, you don't have to listen to that.
Yeah, I've never had that problem.
And I was just like, oh, really? Would you like to get married? I mean,
wow. Wow. I am just now finding out the main reason you married me is because I liberated you.
You truly did. And it sounds so stupid, but and no, that's not really the reason, but it was your mother's chocolate sheet cake. We all know that.
We all know that.
We all know that. I wanted that recipe, by golly. But no. So but it was one of those little things that you were just like, yeah, I don't really like contemporary Christian music.
Right.
And you're a preacher, and it was like record scratch, like what?
What?
So anyway, so all that to say, like that was about the time they were kind of hitting the main market. And so I missed a lot. I knew of them, but didn't really hear a lot of their music. So my familiarity with Derek is more recent.
Right.
And which, I love kind of what has happened to that kind of generation of contemporary Christian music artists, what I've seen. And I kind of am sad that I miss a lot of the jokes, from that age group of people who are just a little bit younger than me, who get all the nuance and all the references. But I'm loving this moment, which, he and Flamey Grant and Jennifer Knapp, which we have a story about in the magazine, this edition, who are just so focused on justice issues and at looking at the world from a place of love and acceptance. And so anyways, I'm thrilled that we were able to interview Derek, have this conversation with him, and I'm thrilled to just become more of a super fan now.
Exactly. So Missy and I will be right back with Derek Webb. Derek's got a new album coming out next week titled Survival Songs, and it is his love songs to the LGBTQ community. They are outstanding. I can't wait for its release. We'll be right back with Derek Webb. As a former college baseball player, I know firsthand the challenges athletes face. That's why we're proud to support Christian Athlete Circles, a ministry that is creating spaces and resources to accompany athletes on their faith journey, wherever they are. To learn more about Christian Athlete Circles, go to ChristianAthleteCircles.org. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. As a 30-plus year music industry veteran, Derek Webb has sold millions of albums while ruffling political and spiritual feathers as both a solo artist and founding member of the Texas-based rock folk band Caedmon's Call. Derek considers himself a blue-collar singer-songwriter from Nashville, Tennessee. He is a longtime and highly vocal ally to the queer community. Next week on April 18th, he will release an entire album of songs he wrote for his family, kids, and families like his and their allies. The new album is called Survival Songs. Derek, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Hi, how's it going?
So Derek, thank you so much for joining us today and for also giving us a little sneak peek at the new album, or I guess sneak listen maybe might be more appropriate. So we're excited to talk about it.
It's a pleasure. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but first let's start. I'll confess that I am more familiar with Derek Webb, the solo artist, than Caedmon's Call, because by the time Caedmon's Call kind of hit the scene, Mitch and I were newly married, and he had convinced me that the road to heaven was not paved with contemporary Christian music CDs. And so
why'd you have to help me?
I so appreciate Mitch's ministry.
Because it's probably one of the biggest gifts you gave me at that age and stage of life. Like,
you're free. You're free of it.
Free. No more Ray Bolts on my playlist, please.
I know. Anyway. I mean, unless you so choose.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I want to start with a little bit of background, because anyone who did grow up like we did in the 80s, 90s contemporary Christian music movement would know that the journey from a recording studio in Second Baptist Church of Houston to an album titled Survival Songs for the Queer Community and Allies is one with a few plot twists. So
So well said.
Yeah. So I thought I would just ask you to start by telling us a little bit of that journey and about especially some of those pivotal moments that led to where you are today.
Wow. Well, I thank you for that. And that's a very, very well framed question, because you're right. And what's crazy is, so Caedmon's, yeah, that's how I got my start. And so we started the band down in Texas in the early 90s, 92, right out of high school I was. And I was in that band for about 10 years before I started making doing solo work. But as it turns out, Caedmon's Call as a band is very much like Hotel California. You check out whenever you like, but you never really leave.
Yeah, I love it.
Because I'm still in Caedmon's Call. We recorded a record together that was a re-recording of our original self-titled record. We did that like maybe a couple of years ago. We played 2 shows at the Ryman the year before last. I mean, we're still apparently doing it, I guess, occasionally.
Yeah.
And that makes it all even the more complicated.
Yeah, right. That's fascinating that you say that, because one of our featured stories in this latest edition of Good Faith Magazine, which is a product of Good Faith Media, Jennifer Knapp, her re-release of Kansas. So
yes. Yes.
All of it's coming back.
Exactly. Yeah, all that's old is new again. And Jen has been a friend for decades. Yeah. And, you know, we played shows together when I was in Caedmon's and when she was first getting started. And then, you know, it's just like the Lord, gang, is what it is, because that is a perfect segue for me to answer your question. So those early years that our band spent doing that, and then into my solo career, you know, I have always considered my job, and any creative person's job, if you're creative, you're listening to this, if you like this, have it, try it out, see how you feel about it. But the job description for creative that I like is to look at the world and describe it. Look at the world, tell us what you see, because it speaks to every bit of the grid through which I'm looking at the world, and my personality, my life experiences. And it's also full of variables, because the world is constantly changing that we are trying to describe. And we are constantly changing as we try to describe it. And the fascinating thing is, you can stand in the same place, you know, 5, 10, 20 years later, see a completely different thing as a completely different person, describe it a completely different way, or not describe it at all. And so it's so interesting how that does change over time. And in this job, if you're doing your job right, if you're doing it honestly over time, there's like a 100% chance that you are going to eventually disagree with all your old material.
Right.
If you're being honest along the way.
Guilty. I've got a lot of sermons that are in the trash right now.
Exactly. But those were the coordinates by which we got here. And here is a good place. I'm really happy to be here. And so, and every bit of that's what makes me me. It's I'm made up of all those songs and all those years, and so it all comes with me. It all belongs. And but I mentioned Jen because Jen and I met back up after I was a few years into my solo career. This would have been, you know, mid 2000s, and Jen had been living out of the country for years. When she first left kind of the industry and her huge career that she had at that time, and she just kind of ghosted at one point because she just couldn't be in her own life anymore, because it was so, it had gotten, and if you know Jen, you know her story, then you know exactly how all that went at the time. And but she had just moved back to Nashville, and she'd been in Australia for a long time. And when she met back up, I had just put out a record that was called Stockholm Syndrome. And I'd gotten into just a little bit of trouble with a song on that record that was basically me just kind of holding the church to account for the way that it treats the queer community. I had a lot of friends and a lot of family members who were at the business end of that judgment at the time, and it just seemed incongruent to me in a lot of ways. And so I had this song on that record that directly addressed that, and so it had been kind of part of the story of that record and that kind of time. And it goes all the way back to there for me. And maybe that was 2010 or something, or I don't remember what year that was. I don't remember what year, so it doesn't matter. But anyways, and Jen had just moved back, and she'd been such a good friend. We met up, like, I think the first week she was back in town, and just immediately I was like, what can I do? How can I support you? How can I, like, let's go do something. And so the first tour that Jen did when she came back, before she was even making new music again, was the two of us, we went and an amazing artist named Amy Quartz. The three of us went out and played a bunch of clubs together and spent some time together. And it was during that tour she went on Larry King and very publicly came out, and we had people stand out in front of our shows with signs, and it was the whole nine.
Yeah.
And so like there's something about this, these issues, and especially with this particular community, with the queer community, that have really been so important to me for a really long time.
Yeah.
It has been always complicated because I have been associated with kind of an evangelical Christian belief, which has been the way I've looked at the world for a long time. It's about 10 years since I have identified that way in terms of my beliefs, or my belief is a terrible word. My assumptions, my opinions about invisible reality.
Right.
I often say that when it comes to things you can't see, like God, things you can't know, like the future, uncertainty is a great way to go. It's a great place to start. And which is not the enemy of faith, it's the prerequisite of faith. And so I'm permanently uncertain about those things now, but it goes back really far for me. And I think that how I got specifically to here is the way that a lot of people do, which is it just has become extremely personal to me. Increasingly, I have had to watch my dear loved ones in my family and my dear friends in my community squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And then finally, it just feels like it's been crescendoing with the second trip through the White House for Trump specifically has just really left a lot of my friends unsure how they're going to survive, honestly.
Yeah.
And for some of my younger family members and friends, it's the literal difference between life and death.
Yeah.
It's life and death for these folks. And so it became such an urgency for me. And just a few months ago, I realized what I needed to do and what I could contribute. And so I started writing these songs, and they just poured out. I wrote and recorded this whole album in like less than a month, which is super fast for me. And April 18th is the quickest I could put it out. So,
well, that is a great segue to survival songs. And like Missy said, thank you so much for giving us a sneak listen to these songs. And they are phenomenal. The entire album is really powerful and meaningful. I know, especially folks within the LGBTQ community, as well as their allies, and this is just going to be life-giving to a lot of them. And so thank you for writing this and producing it. And I know everybody's going to be really excited when it's released next week. So there are 3 songs that I want to talk about particular. And the first one is Queer Kid. It captures a conversation you had with a family member about their first day back at school after Trump's election. So can you tell our audience a little bit more about that experience in song?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having specific questions, and thanks for listening and those kind words. So Queer Kid is the album opener, and so as you said, it came from a literally word for word conversation I had with somebody in my family who at the first day of school, of high school back, after Trump was elected, and just suddenly what it felt like to be a queer kid in a public school. And it, like, there was this literally, and when I heard this line, I mean, I wrote it down immediately that, here's a teenager, a kid, a child really, going back to their school, which is supposed to be a safe place for them to be and to learn, and to socialize. And they gathered with their close friends and looked at each other, and someone literally said, as a joke, kind of, well, I guess we're illegal now. I guess we're illegal. And suddenly there was just all of this anxiety and this fear, which is kind of written into that chorus of, like, just wondering, where are my queer kids who I care about and friends gonna live? They're getting squeezed out of the world right now. And especially for kids, and especially when you know the statistics about especially adolescents and youth, the suicide rates, the self-harm rates are through the roof, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying to people who love these folks. And But if they have just one person, one adult especially in their lives who loves them and supports them and respects them and is willing to use their chosen name, is willing to use their pronouns, is willing to just go with them through that entire adventure and exploration, it literally turns those statistics upside down. If they have even one person in their lives who cares enough to what is the risk? Who is injured by my using a preferred name with a person? Who is injured by me using a preferred pronoun for a friend?
Your ability to control that person is injured. So
yes,
therein
that's a great
lies
point.
the problem.
That's right.
With
That's right.
those who seek to control.
And,
Sorry.
like even
to
a
interrupt.
line in the song where he's writing about the president says, even the president is treating you like a bad stepdad, thinking everything that makes you different makes him look bad. And, it is that notion of control and judgmentalism that we see against the queer community. And it's just a shame. But I love some of the other lyrics that you write in this particular song, Derek, because, you talk about showing love can make you a criminal that you mentioned a moment ago. But then you said, only you can define who you are. Oh my gosh. I mean, so simple, but yet so profound.
Yeah. Well, and what's crazy is that that's profound in
Right.
2025.
Yeah.
That someone gets to decide for themselves how they feel and who they see when they look at themselves and what they feel when they look at other people and how they fit into the world. And that has become I understand every bit of it. I understand how we got here. I don't like it. It doesn't make sense to me, but I do understand how we got here, how the lives of people have become have become politicized in this way. People who are just trying to live happily and freely, and whose lives are not in any way injuring anybody else, other than, as you said. I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's it affects, that they start to wonder, well, what are my neighbors going to think, and what are the people at my church going to think, and what are these people? And I think that what you really must do, especially if you're talking about family members, what you must do is put right at the front of your mind, like, okay, this might be uncomfortable. I might not like this. This might be awkward for me to figure out how to navigate this with this person, but keep the stakes clearly in your mind at all times. And don't let yourself for a second think that it's not a matter of life and death.
Yeah.
Because it is. And what is worth risking the lives of people who you love? What's worth that? Like, is it really worth saying, no, I'm not willing to call you that? I mean, think of it like a nickname. I'm not willing to call you that word. I'm not willing to, like, you're just going to have to kind of get in line. You're going to have to kind of, get into these conventions. If you realize, I mean, because I know a lot of stories of people who, looking back, wished that they had done that simple, easy thing, because of what it meant in terms of the way it affected the people in their lives who they love.
Yeah.
And that is what is at stake. And anyway, I mean, as a family member, as a parent, as a friend, I think about this constantly. I think about it every day. And that was so much of the urgency of writing these songs, imagining what soundtrack do other allies, other family, and what language did my queer friends in my community communicate to me that would be helpful. I actually I had a giant list of friends who I called and texted and said, if you could think about, for me, what would be something that if you had heard when you were a teenager, when you were an adolescent, if someone had said this to you, it would have made a real difference. And it would have really given you some confidence, or it would have empowered you in some way. It would have comforted you in some way. What would that be? Like talk to your younger self. And I got so much good feedback. And that is so much of where the lyrics for this album were framed, in terms of how I was trying to provide some soundtrack for young queer folks who are trying to survive the world right now.
Well, a lot of the lyrics are priestly in nature, Derek, and I want to applaud you for showing that type of compassion and love towards the LGBTQ community. But every now and again, Derek, you get behind a pulpit and go full Amos on us. And in one of these instances, you talk about this wholesale genocide that is being attempted. And I had to sit with that for a second, Derek, because I started thinking about from the horrid practice of conversion therapy that happens in a lot of churches,
Yep. Yep.
asking trans kids to deny themselves and to convert to quote unquote whatever
Yes.
the minister or counselor says they should be,
Right.
to public policy making it illegal to be who you are in public spaces.
Right.
There's this whole gamut. And to frame it in this idea of a genocide, of eliminating an entire community within a society,
Mm.
you're absolutely right.
Mm.
And I thought that message needed to be screamed from the rooftops, that this is what the LGBTQ community is facing,
Yes.
an attempt at elimination.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's crazy is like when I make up a lot of words in my line of work, and and I made up a handful for this on this album, but it's fun. It's like try it out. If you like it, use it. If you don't, I made it up, and so it probably won't stick or whatever. But the idea of gender side, which is actually which was obviously a play on words, but to me that's what it feels like. It feels targeted to me. And when I imagine, these kids, like I remember what it's like to be in high school, to be in junior high, to be in middle school. I remember, man, it was tough. And I don't have it remotely like many of my friends and family members. I can't imagine what it would be like to go through all just the regular insecurities and just constantly adapting to everybody and everything, trying to just kind of figure yourself out and where you fit. And then on top of that, to have all this social and political pressure that you can't really even wrap your head around at that age. I mean, it just seems so unfair and so, and that is why what's funny is that the bridge of Queer Kid that you're quoting from, that starts with the, even the president's treating you like a bad stepdad. That, I think those are the first lines I wrote for the album. I think that whole bridge, that kind of rambling bridge section, I literally was sitting in my car about to go into Kroger, a month and a half ago. And I was thinking specifically about some people in my life. And I just was like emoting probably a little bit, but and I just started furiously thumb typing, and I was just like, and most of that bridge to that song got written that day. And I think it was like kind of the tip of the spear that kind of cracked open and all the rest of the songs came through.
Yeah.
So let's talk about nail polish.
Yeah.
So tell us about the title and tell us about that song in particular, because that's quite a unexpected, I guess, title for a song on this album.
Exactly. Well, I'm looking for endorsements is what it comes down to.
Oh, okay. OPI
I'm talking with several.
I'm
talking with several companies about trying to get cases. No, so what it is, so I mean, as you can, your listeners won't know this, but so we'll let them in on this part. But like, I tend to keep my nails painted. I am a straight cisgender white man, and and so I get questions about that. I've had people ask me like, cool, like, are you just kind of getting in touch with your punk rock roots, or like what's with the nail polish, whatever. And I've gotten that question a lot over a few years, and I just thought, as I was thinking through these songs and what would be language I think is important, not only for queer folks, queer youth, but also queer allies and family members. The second song on the record, Nail Polish, is about why I paint my nails. And the reason is because here's what I've learned. If I'm with my friends, my family members, who are potentially unsafe in public, depending on where we are and who's there and what kind of political views they have and what kind of bone they might have to pick with somebody. What I've learned is if I paint my nails, it's just this perfect trick that always works, where people cannot resist outing themselves to you as potentially unsafe people. And when I'm in public with my family and my friends in the queer community, having my nails painted draws the looks to me, especially as a dad, as a guy my age walking around, when people see it, I can immediately scan a room and identify all the potentially unsafe people in the room.
Yeah.
Because they out themselves to me immediately, because they start looking at me and they start giving me the scowls and the looks, the side eyeing me, long before they see my friends, my family come in the door. And for me, that is an extremely important thing that I can do to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to keep my people safe.
So yeah, it just made me think of, like I said, my familiarity with you is more recent days, especially in your collabs with Flaming Grant, and
Yes.
the video that you guys did together. The opening quote of that, which is, "If you claim to be someone's ally but aren't getting hit by stones thrown at them, you aren't standing close enough," by Stan Mitchell, and that just
Yeah.
is what that whole thought the song kind of portrays, is that you're just standing in that gap, you're standing in the way. And I love
Yeah.
that so much.
Thank you for that. Well, and Stan's quote is amazing. And yeah, for anybody who's been with me for the last few years, they're not scandalized by me having painted nails, because they saw me go into full drag with Flamey Grant in that video.
Which was amazing.
For Boys Will Be Girls, which was a gift Flamey gave me to
Absolutely.
do that with me in that video. I mean, was just it was life-changing experience. But yeah, I mean, so it's not only an early warning system that I can use as a family member and ally to queer people, but it also is one of those. It's like, it goes back to the story of when Flamey and I, along with Semler and some other folks, went to the Dove Awards last year. And we weren't aiming to get into all kinds of trouble, which we did, but we were going because we felt like we belonged there, because we make music for Christians. We make Christian music, and not always, but some of the time. And we all had put out records into the Christian music space that year, and so these are our colleagues. We belong there, so we went, and they don't get to tell us, who does and doesn't belong in that room. And so, anyways, but for me, I always want to make sure that I am aligning myself so deeply with my friends that whatever treatment they are going to receive in public, people cannot help but throw at me also. And so if I'd walked into the Dove Awards, for instance, with Flamey and Semler and all those friends, and I had just dressed like I'm dressed now, or dressed in a suit, or whatever the conventions, binary conventions would have called for that night, then I easily, in an uncomfortable moment, could have hidden out. I could have hidden in all that privilege. I could have hidden right behind all that. And I've gotten to the point where it's really important to me to always make sure I am fully, visibly supporting and standing with my friends, my community, my family. And so, yeah, and what's interesting is it to me felt like a Christian ethic. I mean, I literally, after the fact, I was like, well, I feel like I just followed Jesus right into a dress and pearls and heels that night, and went to the Dove Awards with my friends. Because the thing is, like, what people, and I know that this may not be the core audience who may be hearing this, and maybe it is, but for my Christian friends, my evangelical friends, you need to remember that Jesus was arguably, I mean, he was anti-empire, but he was hated and persecuted because he so radically loved and was willing to have his reputation ruined for marginalized people in his world. That's what he was. And so if you ask me, where do I see Jesus in 2025? He would inarguably be standing with marginalized people. Yeah. So he would be with queer people. He would be with immigrants. He would be with women and people of color. He'd be with everyone who's marginalized in our culture right now, is where he would be. So I don't really see what's so provocative about it, other than every one of these people groups has been politicized, and we've been put into this incredible polarized world right now where there is no nuance to these things, and you cannot. It's dangerous. Love is dangerous. Yeah. It is, and it's getting more dangerous every day. And yeah, so nail polish.
There's a lot more to that title than it expresses. So I appreciate that.
These two songs, all the songs on the album are just really remarkable. There is one that I want to talk about finally. That is life-saving, Derek. And that is the story of a barista. And the title of the song is "I Was There Too, It Won't Be This Way Forever." Can you tell us a little bit about the story behind that song and why it's so important to tell Christians, be kind, be compassionate, and above all else, demonstrate love?
Yeah. Yes. And thank you for asking. And it is I mean, emotionally for me, it's kind of an up tempo number, but it's emotionally probably the hardest song for me to
Right.
play even, because it's a story of a family member, a loved one of mine, was in a Starbucks, and this is someone who has struggled with self harm in their life, and they were in a Starbucks, and there was a barista there, just a sweet, brave, loving person who was just there doing their job, and in a flash just happened to notice something that probably maybe other people might not have realized what it was, and but it was evidence of self-harm, and they saw that, and they knew that because they had struggled with that, and they knew something about that, and they had been through that. And when they saw that, they, without saying anything about it, they, on the back of a receipt, they hand wrote this note that said, "I was there too. It won't be this way forever." And and folded that up and tucked it into the little coffee sleeve with the coffee that they handed to this person. And when I heard about this note, and uh, and and having gone through some of this with my family and with people I love, I mean, it was, it's my favorite note that's ever been written.
Yeah,
It's the
absolutely.
most important two lines that I've ever heard in my life, and to me it was like that, being willing to say it's the like the backwards gift sometimes that we're given of going through extremely hard things, and then having that experience to be able to tell another person you are not alone in what you're experiencing right now. There is something that I can tell you. I have been where you are, and I've come through, and I'm here now, and you can and will survive this, and you can and will get through this, and I am here as proof that you will and that you can. And I so yeah, and that song is just literally that story. I went and found that barista later,
Oh, wow.
Wow.
and was able to thank them. And I actually, this is crazy. This part's crazy. And people who are listening will not be able to see this, but if you go on my Instagram, you could find it. I actually got in the handwriting
Oh my
of that
gosh, there it
note.
is.
I literally got those words tattooed on my arm.
I love it.
In the literal handwriting of this note, and I have it framed in my house actually. And so that song, the first handful of times I played it for my wife after I wrote it, I mean, it took me 3 or 4 attempts
Yeah,
because
sure.
I just couldn't get through it. And so exactly as you said, it's so, just looking at people and just looking for ways to help folks feel less alone in their lives.
Yeah.
And especially if you have experienced something that you can sense and intuit and tell that someone that you're interacting with has also, or maybe might right now be experiencing. I don't remember who said, that everyone you meet is going through a great battle. And so you have to be compassionate and kind with people because you have no idea what people are surviving or going through at any given time. And so to look for those people and look for opportunities to be able to say, to pull someone aside or to safely, secretly sneak a message and say, "Hey, I was there, and it's not always going to be like this, and you're going to be okay," and can be so deeply meaningful, and it can save lives.
Yeah. Well, the album is Survival Songs, and it comes out April 18th. So next week, so you're going to make certain that you want to download it wherever you listen to your music. It is a remarkable, remarkable album. The songs are very powerful. They're challenging. They're inspirational. Some are hard to listen to, as you've already indicated, but also they're necessary listens. And so thank you for writing them and giving them to us. So, but before we let you go, and I hand it over to Missy, and she asked our final question, I've got one last question. So
Okay.
I want to go up to about
I have
30,000.
commentary, so
Yeah, exactly.
I want to go about 30,000 feet in the air with you, Derek, because this album, while it concentrates on the struggles and needs of the LGBTQ plus community. There's a lot of issues in our world today. We think about immigration, we think about
Yes.
systemic racism, wars, economic disparities.
Yeah.
I mean, so many issues.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have been talking to artists about is the great need for artists to rise up. I remember the great quote from Mr. Rogers, when you find
Yes.
yourself in trouble, look for the helpers in your
Yeah.
community. I would like to take that and play off of that. Anytime we are finding ourselves in a cultural crisis or a time of peril, as we do now, look to the artist, because the artists are able to interpret and communicate a path forward for us. Are you having
Mm.
conversations with other artists in your field about the need to be more prophetic in your songwriting uh, process,
Yeah.
to bring songs? Because I think about the Vietnam era, I think about the civil rights
Yes.
era, all of these songs, these incredible songs that emerged during
Yes.
those time periods. We need more artists like Derek Webb writing songs. So tell me what kind of
Hmm.
conversations you're hearing in the industry at this time.
Well, I can't say how much I appreciate. Those are humbling words, and I appreciate it. And I do think there is that part of art that can be prophetic in that way. Um, uh, and I do feel like my creative friends, are quiet and busy right now. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's a lot of my friends, and I think of folks like Tiffany Arbuckle, who's in the band Plum, another band that goes way back to the era with
Yeah.
Caedmons and Jen Knapp. And Tiffany's a great friend and has been for decades. She has gone through a lot of growth and evolution, and is putting out music that is tremendous right now, for all the same reasons. But yes, there's a great book by Howard Zinn that's called Artists in a Time of War, and it's about this big. I mean, it's a really, really short book, and I have reread it in the last few months,
Mm-hmm.
because there is an opportunity, because with music and with art, it's like you can build a Trojan horse and you can put things in it and it can get places sometimes. And as having been a pastor, you know that sometimes you can have the best language, the most helpful language, but sometimes it's hard to get it through all the complexity of someone's grid through which they're looking at the world. It's hard to get, but sometimes you put a melody with it,
Right.
and it can get through there. So there is a real potential for that. The reason I am encouraging my friends, and I really hope that they are doing it, is because of everything you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
There are because when I've had friends and I've told them about this record and what I'm doing and what's focused on, and I've had a few friends challenge me and say, well, what about what's happening in Palestine? What about what's
Right.
happening with immigrants? What about what's happening? And they're correct,
Mm-hmm.
and you're correct.
Mm-hmm.
What I can tell you is, for me, the tallest fire that I can see and cannot see past, for me in my personal life right now with my friends and family, is this one.
Yeah,
Is
sure.
For me, it's this community. It's especially queer youth. That is just all of my concern is poured towards that. But that is not to say that is the only emergency right now in our culture. Um, and that's why it takes everybody. And so when my other friends who are artists look at the world, they are going to see a completely different thing, and their priorities and their tallest fire is going to be this or this or this or this. But it takes all of us doing it and really specializing to get the most potent possible language to every part of culture that really desperately needs it. And so I hope my friends are doing that.
Yeah.
When I first came up with the idea for survival songs, and I think I named it before I started writing the songs because I realized what I was going to do. Um, I originally named it Survival Songs Volume One,
Mm-hmm.
because I was thinking, I'm not going to let up off the gas with this. I'm going to get these out as quick as I can, and then I'll surely want to continue and keep going. And that's still how I feel. And maybe there's, because there are so many more issues and so many more people who need emergency aid right now, like
Right.
emotional emergency aid. Soundtrack. All great movements have had that soundtrack, as you mentioned, from
Yeah.
folk music in the 50s, 60s, to hip hop for the last probably 2 decades has really been the folk music and brought the stories of the people and been the underground newspaper in so many ways, and
Yeah.
journalism. Stand-up comedians are prophetic in so many ways, and it's like, but it takes all of us. And
That's
so I'm specializing on this right now. Maybe I'll do more, for even more, but we do. And if you are an artist listening, we need you. I mean, you're exactly
absolutely.
right. We need you.
Absolutely.
Look at your immediate world and start to describe the tallest fire you see, and then just get it out as quick as you can, and then let's all do it again. We have to. And it's a great question. I appreciate it.
Amen, amen, amen. Well, Derek Webb, you are welcome back to Good Faith Weekly anytime, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us this week. And again, congratulations on Survival Songs. It is out April the 18th, wherever you listen to your music. But Derek, and before we let you go, we've got one last question to ask you, and I'm going to kick it over to Missy for her to ask it.
So, Derek, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
Well, it's incredible considering what a talker I am. There could possibly be more to tell. You asked me a question, then 45 minutes later, you asked me the second question.
Love it.
So I would love, these are obviously very nuanced things that we're talking about. And even though we spend a good deal of time together discussing this, there's more to tell. It's nuanced, it's complicated. And so I would love for folks to be able to find the record. I would love for them to be able to have longer conversations with me. I would love to facilitate those conversations. And so, I would just love for folks to spend some time with their record. If folks want to head over to derekwebb.com, DerekwEbb. That's where I'm at. On socials, anywhere you're off listening to music. I would love for you to spend a little time with the songs and then come and talk to me. Come and talk to me online. Let's talk all day. This is what I do, and I would love to. And also, I'm about to be out on the road till the end of the year, playing mostly all house shows. Is what I do. That's the center of the bullseye for me, is to go into the most intimate possible space with the smallest group, and play the songs, have conversation. That's how I do it. And I'm coming all over the place. And so I would love for folks to come out, and I'd love to meet you, come out. Yeah, that's it. So that would be incredible. Thank you.
Nice.
Absolutely. Well, check out his website. And again, make sure you download the album April 18th, Survival Songs. Derek Webb, thank you so much for joining us this week on Good Faith Weekly.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
So, Mitch.
Yes.
There are several things I've written down in my notes, but the one thing that Derek mentioned that we kind of, and I interrupted him on because it just hit a nerve, because it's something that is so, I don't know, it gets up on my crawl so much, is, when he mentioned, what is it hurting you to call someone what they want to be called?
Exactly.
To use their pronouns.
Exactly.
This just drives me bananas, because it makes me so angry that the world is able to put names, monikers on you when you don't want them. That's how a bully does. Look at our president. That's the first thing he does when he doesn't like you. He assigns you a moniker that is derogatory.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And it is a means of what I call peeing on your tree. It's a dog marking his territory.
Yeah.
That's a means of, laying claim and controlling and dominance, and it's disgusting. And so that's what you and I talk about this with our kids all the time. We struggle with the change in pronouns, not because we don't want to do what's right. It's just because it's different. And we acknowledge that. Like, we're sorry if we forget, or if we're having a hard time.
Right.
We support you. We love you. We're just old and we forget.
Yeah.
But anyways, so that's what it's just in. Yes. So now it's another, it's just bugging me again to think about that.
The significance of identity, and especially personal identity, is extremely important for personhood, as well as the ability to live in an equitable society. And when we think about names, and pronouns go along with that naming, it's so important. Obviously we read the importance of names in the Bible, but we think about, more historically, and you mentioned how the president, offers a slur of some kind when he's trying to break somebody down. But the importance of calling somebody by what they want to be called, and whether that is a personal name, whether that is a pet name. Hey, speaking of, remember when we first got married? It was when you were wanting that sheet cake and
that recipe, yes.
Yeah, the recipe. Remember, we had a conversation about nicknames and pet names.
You were adamant.
I was so adamant.
Like, we do not use...
Because we hung around people that use those
We
kind
do
of
not
things.
use pet names.
We do not use
your
pet
least
names.
favorite, Babe.
I hate it.
You hate Babe.
I
And
do.
so I said it one time, and you were like, oh,
Nope.
no.
Oh,
We're
no.
not doing
We're
that.
not doing
And
that.
you know what I said? I respect you.
You did. And you have not called me babe since
No,
then. I
no.
appreciate that about you. But, you think about history, and especially here in the United States, and with the adaptation of colonization, not only here, but around the world, one of the first things colonizers did when they landed here in North America is that they started calling the indigenous people by the names they wanted to be identified by. Not the indigenous people, but the colonizers wanted to identify them. So instead of, like, my name, for example, Namukatsu, which is Comanche, they would have called me Mitch, because that
was your English.
That was
well,
my
I mean,
English name.
But that was the name your. Let's go back. That was the name your parents gave
Right,
you.
right.
You were
Later just an example. Yeah,
named, but it would have been reversed.
Been reversed, yeah, 100%, yeah. So we also think about this with the African slave trade and how colonizers changed the name of Africans when they brought them over and enslaved them. And I think of Alex Haley's incredible novel and the fictional character Kunta Kinte, who, that was his African name, and then came over here. And of course, they changed his name to a more Christian name in the book. And so it's a tool by people in power to impose an identity. And I've had that happen, throughout my life. People try to, I think in an attempt to be affectionate, use nicknames towards me. And it's like, that's dehumanizing.
Yeah, I've become really sensitive in the last several years to the name thing. And it just, I always ache when someone who is not from our country or is from a different culture or a different language who tells you their name and they say, but you can just say it like this because nobody can pronounce it. And I work really hard. I'm like, no, I really want to be able to say your name because that is important and it's important to you. So yeah, that just, it just strikes a chord with me. It's something that struck a chord again when Derek mentioned it, and just want to reiterate that it just, what does it hurt you to call someone what they want to be called, to use the pronoun that they want to be referred to by? It hurts you zero.
Yeah, doesn't cost you anything.
Zero.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was one thing that just stood out to me. And the other thing that kind of was a challenge to me at the end, where Derek was talking about as an artist, and he focuses so much on, the queer community, and people will say, well, why aren't you singing about this or that? And basically, he's saying it's going to take all of us, and we all need to look, what is the fire in front of you? And that's just something I struggle with so much, because there are so many fires. I envy people who can see the thing in front of them and get there and advocate for that issue or that thing. And we know folks who, see lots of different fires and camp out there. I just have a hard time looking in front of me and seeing so many different fires and so much chaos, and not feeling paralyzed, sometimes just not knowing what to do and where to start.
Yeah. And I think one of the great parts of this job and being part of Good Faith Media is that we get to encounter people like this all the time, the Derek Webbs of the world. But I also think about Elkit Rodriguez with Fellowship Southwest, and him helping immigrants every day of his life. He's doing something to help migrants in this country. I think of Sarah Cunningham with Free Mom Hugs. Just a simple hug has changed the world for so many people. I think of one of our board members, Don Gordon, who looked at the world and saw it was burning and has dedicated the rest of his career for creation care. I think about Skye Perryman and what she's doing at Democracy Forward and tackling the fires that are in front of her right now coming out of Washington, D.C., and, in a lot of cases winning. I think of George Mason and Nancy Caston and all the incredible work they're doing down at Faith Commons, and the interfaith work that they're doing and spreading that message. It's amazing to think that there's so many people out there that are doing work and putting out those fires that are right before them. And I just admire them so much.
Absolutely. So I don't know. I'm really a bigger fan of Derek Webb now than I was
Well, of
before our
course.
conversation today. It was lovely. And I look forward to the album's release
Yep.
and sharing it with our friends.
Yep. So make certain to download his new album on April 18th, Survival Songs. It is fantastic.
If you're in the Nashville area, I hear there is a drop party on April 17th.
That's what I hear.
I bet you can find out information on his website. Derek's main mode of entertainment is house concerts.
Yep.
So, those aren't always in homes. Sometimes they're in churches or other small venues, but that's the way he likes to relate to his audience. And I love that so much. It's always small and intimate gatherings. So definitely go to his website. If you're interested in hosting a house concert or maybe your churches, hit him up.
Absolutely, Missy. And Missy and I will be back next week. Until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.